My name is Andrew Matthews, and 12 years ago I thought I'd found my forever. Sarah and I met during our graduate programs. She was studying marketing, I was finishing my engineering degree. We were both ambitious, both driven, both looking for something stable in a chaotic world. When we married at 27, everyone said we were the perfect match. Now, at 39, I run a mid-level engineering consultancy that keeps us comfortable in our suburban Denver home. Sarah, 36, climbed the ladder at her marketing firm to become a senior account director. We have the kind of life people Instagram about: weekend hikes, dinner parties with friends, a mortgage we can actually handle, and 2 cars that aren't falling apart. For the past 8 months, we'd been trying for a baby. Not desperately, not with charts and ovulation kits, but naturally, hopefully. Sarah would joke about converting the home office into a nursery, and I'd already started researching the best school districts. We talked about names over morning coffee and imagined family vacations where we'd be outnumbered by car seats and diaper bags. But something had been shifting lately. Sarah seemed distant during our conversations, distracted when we watched movies together. Her phone was always face down now, and those late-night work calls had become more frequent. I told myself it was just stress from her new client portfolio, that the promotion meant longer hours and bigger responsibilities. Then came that Thursday evening in October. Sarah was in the shower, and I was looking for breath mints in her purse, something I'd done countless times before. That's when I found them. A fresh pack of condoms, still sealed, buried beneath her wallet and keys. I stared at that purple package for what felt like an eternity. We'd been actively trying to conceive for months. Why would my wife, who wanted nothing more than to start a family with me, have condoms in her purse? The rational explanations felt hollow even as I tried to convince myself. Maybe she bought them for a friend. Maybe she grabbed them by mistake. Maybe there was some perfectly innocent reason. But as I stood there holding that package, a cold realization crept through my chest. The late meetings, the guarded phone, the way she'd started showering immediately when she came home from work. The pieces weren't forming a picture I wanted to see, but they were forming one nonetheless. I photographed the condoms with my phone, making sure to capture the expiration date, 2 years from now, recently purchased. Then I carefully placed them back exactly where I found them, arranging her wallet and keys to cover them just as they had been. But something fundamental had shifted in my marriage in those 30 seconds. A crack in the foundation that would either be repaired or would grow until the entire structure collapsed. The next morning, Sarah kissed me goodbye as always, her lips warm with coffee and familiar routine. She had no idea that everything had changed, that I'd discovered the first thread in what would prove to be an elaborate tapestry of lies. As her car disappeared around the corner, I stood at the window, making a decision that would define the next chapter of my life. I needed to know the truth, even if that truth destroyed everything we'd built together. I became a detective in my own home, and I hated myself for it. But once that seed of doubt was planted, I couldn't ignore the growing evidence that my 12-year marriage was built on lies. The next few weeks turned into a masterclass in covert observation. I started paying attention to details I'd previously dismissed. How Sarah's emergency client calls always seemed to come during dinner. How she'd suddenly developed an interest in working out after work. How her laptop was now password protected when it never had been before. I began documenting everything. Tuesday night. Sarah claimed to be at a strategy session until 10 p.m., but when I drove past her office building, the parking lot was nearly empty. Thursday evening. She said she was grabbing drinks with her colleague Jessica to discuss the Brandon account. But when Jessica called the house looking for Sarah at 8:30, my blood ran cold. Oh, she must have meant next Thursday. I lied smoothly to Jessica, my voice betraying nothing of the nausea rising in my throat. The lies were getting sloppy, which meant either Sarah was getting careless or she simply didn't think I was paying attention. Both possibilities stung with their own particular brand of insult. I started checking our cell phone records online, scrolling through months of call logs and text message timestamps. There it was, a number that appeared with increasing frequency over the past 3 months, always during work hours, sometimes late at night after I'd gone to bed. The calls were long, intimate in their duration. 30 minutes here, 45 minutes there. These weren't quick work check-ins. My hands shook as I reverse-searched the number. Matthew Adams, age 34, works at Patterson & Associates, the same building complex as Sarah's firm, just 2 floors up. His LinkedIn showed he was a financial advisor, recently divorced, with the kind of professional headshots that screamed available bachelor. I found myself driving past their building during lunch hours, looking for Sarah's silver Camry in the parking garage. It was there, parked next to a black BMW that matched Matthew's registration. They were having lunch together, probably more than lunch. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how normal everything felt at home. Sarah still kissed me goodbye in the morning, still asked about my day, still curled up next to me in bed. She was living 2 lives with such casual expertise that I wondered how long this had been going on. Months? The phone records only went back 3 months, but this comfort level suggested longer. One evening, I tested her. "I heard Patterson & Associates is expanding," I mentioned casually over dinner. "They're taking more space in your building. You know anyone who works there?" Sarah's face remained perfectly neutral as she replied, "No, don't think so." Different floors, different worlds. The lie came so easily, so naturally, that I realized I was married to a stranger. I needed concrete proof, something undeniable that would justify what I was planning to do. Because by this point, a plan was already forming in my mind, dark, methodical, and perfectly suited to an engineer who understood how systems could be manipulated. That night, as Sarah slept peacefully beside me, her breathing deep and untroubled, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. I was done being a victim, done pretending everything was normal while my world crumbled beneath me. It was time to stop being the faithful husband and start being the architect of justice. Engineering taught me that the best solutions are elegant in their simplicity. Complex systems fail because they have too many moving parts, too many variables that can go wrong. What I needed was a plan that was foolproof, untraceable, and devastating. I spent a week researching surveillance equipment, ordering everything online with next-day delivery to my office. Micro cameras the size of coat buttons, recording devices that could be hidden in common household objects, motion-activated systems that would capture everything automatically. I told myself I was gathering evidence for the divorce proceedings, but deep down, I knew I was planning something far more satisfying than legal documentation. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy at home. Sarah and I went through our evening routines, dinner conversations about her difficult clients, weekend grocery shopping, Sunday morning coffee while reading different sections of the newspaper. She even brought up baby names one evening. "I've been thinking Emma sounds perfect for a girl," she said, completely oblivious to the fact that I knew she was actively preventing pregnancy with another man. "It's a beautiful name," I agreed. My voice steady despite my rage. I installed the first camera in our guest bedroom on a Tuesday afternoon while Sarah was at her yoga class, which I now knew was code for Matthew time. The device was virtually invisible, positioned to capture the entire room from an angle that would leave no doubt about any activities taking place. The living room camera went behind a picture frame, and the hallway unit was built into what looked like a smoke detector. But surveillance wasn't enough. I needed something more personal, something that would make them both understand. The depth of their betrayal on a visceral level, that's when I remembered the capsaicin powder I'd bought years ago. For a gardening project, a natural deterrent that was supposed to keep rabbits away from our vegetable plants. The powder was essentially concentrated pepper extract, invisible when mixed with the right lubricant, and completely undetectable until it came into contact with sensitive mucous membranes. I bought a fresh pack of condoms identical to the ones I'd found in Sarah's purse. Using a medical syringe, I carefully injected a small amount of diluted capsaicin solution into each one, then resealed the packages with a heat gun that made the tampering invisible. The solution was precisely calibrated, enough to cause significant discomfort and panic, but not enough to cause permanent damage. I wasn't trying to maim anyone, just deliver a message they'd never forget. The final piece of the plan required perfect timing. I needed Sarah to use those specific condoms, which meant I had to create the right opportunity without raising suspicion. The engineering conference in Seattle was perfect, a real event that would provide genuine documentation of my absence. I registered immediately, even posted about it on social media, creating a digital trail that proved I was 400 miles away when everything went down. 2 days before my departure, I carefully replaced the condoms in Sarah's purse with my modified versions. She never checked the package closely. Why would she? They looked exactly the same, felt the same weight, bore the same brand markings. I also set up remote access to all the surveillance cameras through a secure app on my phone. From my hotel room in Seattle, I'd have a front row seat to whatever happened in my house while I was gone. The night before I left, Sarah seemed almost excited. "I'll miss you," she said, kissing me with more enthusiasm than she'd shown in months. "It's only 3 nights," I reminded her, playing the devoted husband one last time. As my plane lifted off toward Seattle, I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. In 48 hours, my marriage would be over, but justice would finally be served. The Grand Hyatt in Seattle became my command center for the most important surveillance operation of my life. I'd attended exactly 2 conference sessions, just enough to establish my presence. But my real focus was the tablet propped up on my hotel desk, displaying 4 camera feeds from my house in Denver. For the first day, Thursday, nothing happened. Sarah came home at her usual time, heated up leftover pasta, watched Netflix on the couch, went to bed early. I began to wonder if I'd miscalculated, if maybe she'd decided to be faithful while I was away. Part of me almost hoped that was the case. But on Friday evening, everything changed. At 6:47 p.m., I watched Sarah come through the front door carrying a bottle of wine and a bag from Marco's Italian, the expensive place we only went to for anniversaries. She was wearing the black dress I'd bought her for her birthday, the one she claimed was too fancy for everyday occasions. She'd clearly planned this evening with more care than she'd put into our last 5 date nights combined. She moved through the house with nervous energy, lighting candles, dimming lights, checking her appearance in the hallway mirror multiple times. At 7:15, a black BMW pulled into our driveway. Matthew Adams stepped out wearing a business suit and carrying flowers, yellow roses, which I happened to know were Sarah's, favorites because I'd been buying them for 12 years. Watching him walk up to my front door with flowers for my wife was the moment I truly understood what rage felt like. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger I'd expected. It was cold and precise, like liquid nitrogen flowing through my veins. Sarah opened the door before he could knock, throwing her arms around him with an intimacy that made my stomach clench. They kissed on my doorstep, not a quick, guilty peck, but a deep, passionate kiss between people who'd been doing this for a long time. They moved to the living room, and I watched them share wine and conversation with the easy comfort of established lovers. Matthew made Sarah laugh in ways I couldn't remember seeing in months. She touched his arm, played with her hair, exhibited all the flirtatious behaviors that had once been reserved for me. At 9:20 p.m., Sarah took Matthew by the hand and led him toward the guest bedroom. My heart pounded as I realized this was it, the moment everything I'd planned would come to fruition. I switched to the bedroom camera feed, my finger hovering over the recording button. They were unhurried, comfortable with each other's bodies in a way that spoke of multiple previous encounters. Sarah excused herself to the bathroom, and I watched her emerge with a small foil package, my specially prepared condom. What happened next unfolded with the brutal efficiency I'd engineered. For the first few minutes, everything appeared normal. Then, gradually, I saw confusion creep across both their faces. Matthew stopped moving first, a look of concern replacing passion. Sarah sat up, touching herself with growing alarm. Within seconds, both of them were scrambling apart. Matthew doubled over in pain, while Sarah rushed toward the bathroom with her hands pressed between her legs. "Something's wrong!" Sarah screamed through the audio feed. "Oh God, it burns!" Matthew stumbled toward the hallway bathroom, his voice strained as he shouted, "What the hell was in those condoms?" I don't know. Sarah was crying now, and then I heard her on the phone with emergency services, trying to explain through her tears that they needed an ambulance. I closed the laptop and began packing my bags. My return flight wasn't until Sunday, but I'd catch the first flight Saturday morning. It was time to return home and finish what I'd started. The emergency room at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital was exactly where I knew they'd end up. I'd caught the 6 a.m. flight Saturday morning, arrived in Denver by 8:30, and drove straight to the hospital where I knew they'd still be seeking treatment. Capsaicin burns take hours to fully subside. I found them in the waiting area looking like refugees from a disaster. Matthew was hunched forward in his chair, still wearing his wrinkled dress shirt from the night before. Sarah sat 3 seats away, interesting that they weren't comforting each other, wearing a hospital gown over her underwear, her black dress presumably ruined or abandoned in their panicked flight from the house. They looked up when I walked in, and the expressions on their faces were priceless. Confusion, fear, and dawning realization crashed across Sarah's features. "Andrew?" Her voice cracked on my name.
What are you doing here?
"Your conference doesn't end until tomorrow. Flight got canceled due to weather," I lied smoothly. "Lucky thing, too, or I might have missed this touching reunion." Matthew started to stand, probably to leave, but I held up a hand and said, "Please don't go on my account. I think we all need to have a conversation." Sarah was shaking her head, trying to construct some narrative. "This isn't what it looks like, Andrew. Matthew and I were just in my guest bedroom." I completed her sentence calmly. "Using condoms while we're supposed to be trying for a baby? Because that's exactly what it looks like, Sarah." The silence that followed was deafening. Other patients in the waiting room were starting to stare, but I didn't care. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope. "I have divorce papers here, already filed and processed. All you need to do is sign them." I slid the envelope across to Sarah, who stared at it like it was a venomous snake. "You also might be interested to know that I've documented everything," I continued. "The phone calls, the lies, the late-night meetings. Oh, and the security footage from last night is particularly compelling. High definition, perfect audio, timestamps that coincide perfectly with my documented presence in Seattle." Matthew finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "You set us up. You did something to those condoms." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "That's a serious accusation." "I have no idea what you're talking about. I was in Seattle, remember? 300 people saw me at the conference." Sarah was crying now, tears of rage and frustration. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough to protect myself legally and financially," I answered. "The house is in my name, as are most of our major assets. The prenup you signed 12 years ago is about to become very relevant." I stood up and straightened my jacket. "There's one more thing you should know. I sent copies of the security footage to your respective employers this morning. Sarah, I believe your firm has a strict morality clause in their executive contracts. Matthew, I'm sure Patterson and Associates will be fascinated to learn how you've been conducting your client relations." Sarah's face went white. "You can't do that. You can't destroy my life over this," she pleaded. "I didn't destroy your life, Sarah," I replied coldly. "You did that yourself the moment you decided our marriage vows were optional." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and don't bother coming home. I've changed the locks and had your belongings packed. They're in storage, Unit 247. The key is with the divorce papers." As I walked away from the hospital, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my new downtown apartment, a sleek 2-bedroom unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the mountains. It's smaller than the house Sarah and I shared, but it's mine. Completely, legally, undisputedly mine. The divorce was finalized in record time. Sarah's lawyer tried to contest the prenup, claiming emotional distress, but the security footage and documented evidence of her affair made their case impossible to argue. She walked away with her car, her personal belongings, and a modest settlement that barely covered her legal fees. The professional consequences were exactly what I'd predicted. Sarah's marketing firm terminated her employment within a week of receiving the footage, citing violation of their moral conduct policies. Her reputation in Denver's marketing community was destroyed overnight. Matthew didn't fare much better. Patterson and Associates discovered he'd been using company time and resources to conduct his affair. He was fired for misappropriation of company assets and breach of professional conduct. Last I heard, he'd moved back to California to live with his parents while he rebuilt his career. The capsaicin burns healed within a few days, but the humiliation lingered much longer. Sarah called me exactly once, 3 weeks after the hospital confrontation. "We ended it," she said without preamble. "Matthew and I, it's over. I'm supposed to care?" I asked. "I just thought you should know," she replied quietly. "The whole thing wasn't worth losing everything." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't. How did you know?" she asked. "About the condoms, I mean. How did you know to—" "Good night, Sarah," I said and hung up. My business has actually grown since the divorce. Word got around about what happened. Not the details of my revenge, just that my wife had cheated and I'd handled it cleverly. Other men started seeking me out, referring clients to my firm. There's apparently a brotherhood of betrayed husbands who respect methodical justice over emotional outbursts. I've started dating again, though cautiously. The woman I'm seeing now, Rebecca, is a divorce attorney who appreciates both my story and my approach to problem solving. She calls me refreshingly honest about my trust issues. Do I regret what I did? Not for a second. Sarah and Matthew made their choices with full knowledge of the consequences. They gambled with my marriage, my future, my dreams of fatherhood, and they lost. Sometimes people ask me if I think my revenge was excessive. I tell them that infidelity is emotional terrorism. It destroys not just the present, but the past and future as well. What I did was proportional justice. They stole my life. So I gave them consequences that would reshape theirs permanently. Engineering taught me that every system has pressure points, places where minimal force can create maximum impact. Marriage, as it turns out, is no different. But now I'm building something new, with better materials and a better blueprint. And this time, I'm the only one with the keys. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.